Welcome to The Debate. When we think of a predator, we usually picture the lion roaring on the savannah. It's loud, it's obvious, and you know to run.
Right. The threat is right in your face.
Exactly. But what if the danger isn't roaring at you? What if the predator is weeping on your couch, telling you how completely unfair the world is, and slowly, methodically convincing you that every single thing going wrong in the relationship is somehow your fault?
Yeah. It's a terrifying scenario.
It is. We are stepping into the incredibly murky, often invisible world of covert narcissism, also known in the clinical literature as vulnerable or closet narcissism. Today, we're investigating the psychological mechanics and the profound interpersonal devastation left in the wake of this pathology.
And it truly is a devastation that leaves no visible bruises, which is, well, that's exactly why it's so insidious. We're looking at a behavioral profile that absolutely dismantles a partner's reality. But the clinical field is deeply split on the engine driving that destruction.
Exactly, and that is the central question we are unpacking today. What is the primary engine of a covert narcissist's destructiveness in relationships? Is this a calculated, predatory strategy of manipulation? A person masquerading as vulnerable to extract power and control?
Or, and this is where I stand, is it an unconscious, desperate defense mechanism driven by profound structural fragility, making it destructive precisely because their perceived victimhood is absolutely genuine in their own mind?
Well, as a behavioral profiler, I argue that covert narcissism is a highly calculated, aggressive strategy for social dominance. I see individuals who lack the loud grandiosity of overt narcissists, sure, but they possess the exact same underlying entitlement structure. They're just utilizing stealth tactics, like weaponized incompetence and passive aggression to secure control. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. This camouflage is a calculated extraction of power, rather than mere emotional fragility.
I come at it from a different way. While the behaviors you're profiling are very real, viewing this purely as calculated predation severely oversimplifies the pathology.
You think it oversimplifies it?
I do. As a trauma-informed therapist, I have to look at the psychological architecture beneath the behavior. The covert narcissist suffers from a fundamentally unstable, fragmented self that requires constant external regulation.
Right.
The manipulation is largely an unconscious defense mechanism, and the true destructiveness lies in the severe epistemic damage inflicted on the victim's reality. They aren't purely performing woundedness in some grand plot to ruin you. They're using real woundedness as a tool because they are terrified of annihilation.
Let's lay out the groundwork for this behavioral profile first. Because when we analyze the day-to-day patterns of these individuals, we see an absolute masterclass in impression management.
Oh, they are masters at it, yeah.
Right. The overt narcissist walks into a room and demands attention by bragging, dominating the conversation, taking the spotlight. But the covert narcissist enters that same room and extracts the exact same amount of attention just through a different avenue.
They do it through withdrawal or, a quiet sigh or an air of misunderstood melancholy.
Exactly. It's chronic victimhood, self-deprecation, passive-aggressive control. It's literally a covert operation. We see tactics like the silent treatment, withholding affection, covert gaslighting, all being deployed as indirect methods of domination. They've adapted to use socially acceptable masks, like playing the martyr, to essentially enslave their empathetic partners.
Enslave is a strong word.
But it's accurate. They extract the emotional labor they feel completely entitled to.
The entitlement is there, yes, but the word calculated implies a conscious, Machiavellian chess game that ignores the clinical reality of the disorder.
Scoff, I wouldn't call it a chess game. I'd call it an instinctual predation.
But we have to look at this through Kernberg's object relations theory. Let's translate that out of clinical speak for a second. Object relations theory essentially looks at how our earliest childhood bonds form our internal blueprint for reality.
Okay.
The covert narcissist doesn't have a cohesive, solid self. Their identity is deeply fragmented,
Meaning what, practically? That they just don't know who they are?
meaning they lack the internal hardware to regulate their own self-esteem. Their hypersensitivity to criticism, their deep shame-proneness, these are genuine physiological experiences. Because their internal structure is so incredibly fragile, they frantically use the people around them for external regulation just to survive the day.
But wait, look at how they use that pity. To me, this is where the predatory calculation is just glaring. Their primary weapon is the tactical use of the sob story.
It is a common narrative they use, yes.
They consistently position themselves as perpetually misunderstood, overlooked, or treated unfairly by a cruel world. By playing the ultimate victim, they force the highly empathetic target, and they always choose empathetic targets, into the role of a rescuer.
Yes, they absolutely target empathetic people. The tragedy is that their structural deficit makes them fundamentally incapable of recognizing the separate subjectivity of their partner. They literally can't perceive your needs as real because they are drowning in their own perceived inadequacy.
But it doesn't stop with the intimate partner. They carefully curate this public narrative of victimization to recruit what the clinical literature calls flying monkeys.
The enablers.
Right, the enablers, friends, family members, coworkers, who swallow this manufactured vulnerability hook, line, and sinker. The narcissist orchestrates this web of people to launch preemptive smear campaigns, effectively isolating their target.
I'm not denying the impact, but
They use a mutual friend to deliver a guilt trip or cast themselves as the heartbroken victim before the partner even has a chance to explain why the relationship is failing. If that isn't a calculated military strategy for social control, I just don't know what is.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Okay?
Assuming the intent is a coordinated military strategy completely ignores what's actually happening inside their brain. Let's look at the DSM-5 Alternative Model for Personality Disorders, or AMPD.
Right, the alternative model.
It specifically highlights severe impairments in identity and self-direction. The covert narcissist lacks a self as object.
Meaning they can't look at themselves objectively, they can't introspect?
Exactly. Because they cannot accept fault without triggering a catastrophic shame spiral, their reality is entirely dictated by their fluctuating self-esteem. When they complain to mutual friends that their partner is crazy or treating them terribly, they are frantically defending a fragile ego against the unbearable reality of their own perceived inadequacy.
So you're saying the flying monkeys are just an accident?
The recruitment of flying monkeys isn't a conscious smear campaign in their mind. It's a desperate need for external validation to stabilize their fragmented self. They are bleeding emotionally, and they are just grabbing anyone around them to bandage the wound.
Sighs deeply. But look at the precision of the behavior. You say it's just a frantic defense, a bleeding wound. But notice how the target of the victimhood is almost always the person who is finally setting a boundary?
Well, boundaries are triggering.
Right, when a partner says, I need you to respect my time, or you can't speak to me that way, suddenly the narcissist is overwhelmed, depressed, and claiming that nobody appreciates how hard they try. That's not depression. That's weaponized guilt.
Because that boundary feels like an existential attack to them.
But the timing is too perfect. That's not just fluctuating self-esteem. That's a targeted deflection to avoid accountability. They use their apparent mental health struggles, their anxiety, their depression, their past trauma as an impenetrable shield.
I hear the frustration. I really do.
It's a bait and switch. You try to hold them accountable for something objective, and suddenly you're apologizing for making them feel bad. That takes tactical maneuvering.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the etiology of the disorder, how this actually develops? Many of these individuals grew up with severe attachment trauma.
Sure, trauma plays a role.
Maybe it was conditional love, emotional neglect, or a mix of overpraise for achievements without any genuine emotional connection. They learned in childhood that direct demands for attention or asserting their needs overtly were deeply unsafe.
So they learn to get their needs met through the back door.
Exactly. Their nervous system adapted. The withdrawal, the sulking, the victim narrative, these are deeply ingrained maladaptive survival mechanisms. When they feel criticized by that boundary you mentioned, their ego experiences a catastrophic threat.
But they're adults now.
But the reaction is infantile. The resulting deflection isn't a conscious chess move, it's an automatic egocentric reflex. The concept of superiority through suffering is real to them. They genuinely believe their pain makes them special because it's the only identity that feels safe.
Okay, let's shift this from their internal world to the daily domestic reality of the victim, because this is exactly what trips victims up. This is where the calculation really shows its teeth. Take the concept of weaponized incompetence.
Right.
It is a prime example of stealth control. Imagine the covert narcissist is asked to help with shared household labor, say taking charge of the laundry or cooking dinner. Instead of saying no, which would shatter their carefully crafted image of being the good, supportive partner, they strategically fail.
They do it poorly.
Oh, they don't just do it poorly. They make such a profound mess of it. They wash your silk shirts in hot water, or they ruin the cast iron skillet so thoroughly that the empathetic target inevitably takes over the burden just to avoid the maddening frustration.
It is incredibly frustrating, yes.
It is a behavioral pattern designed to permanently shift labor onto the victim while maintaining total plausible deniability. I was just trying to help. Why are you so mad at me?
It is maddening. I absolutely acknowledge the frustration it causes the partner, but I challenge the framing of it as a calculated, aggressive strike. Think of weaponized incompetence like a frightened animal playing dead.
Scoffs.
Playing dead.
Yes, it's less about a master plan to enslave the partner and more about a pathological avoidance of expectations that might expose their internal inadequacy. If they try to manage the household and genuinely fail, it triggers that unbearable shame we talked about. So they fail preemptively and passively.
I have a really hard time buying the frightened animal analogy. A frightened animal hides. It doesn't purposefully ruin the laundry to permanently shift the household burden onto you.
It's an avoidance tactic. It paints them as helpless and passive. But covert narcissists are highly punitive. Combine that weaponized incompetence with their passive-aggressive micro-insults.
Oh, the backhanded compliment.
Exactly. I'm so glad you have the time to care about keeping a clean house. I've just been so overwhelmed with actual work. Or, I'm so glad you wore that. I could never be brave enough to wear something so unflattering.
Ouch. Yeah.
These are precision strikes. They are designed to erode the target's confidence, keeping them perpetually off balance, while the narcissist plays innocent. When a covert narcissist gives the silent treatment because their partner succeeded at something, that isn't playing dead. That's active, aggressive control.
The true danger there is the interpersonal toll on the victim. The victim's nervous system becomes hypervigilant. They begin walking on eggshells.
Right, but they are walking on eggshells not just because the narcissist is fragile, but because the narcissist has systematically trained them with passive-aggressive punishments to prioritize the narcissist's needs above their own.
Train them?
It is literal operant conditioning. They harbor immense hidden envy. They are jealous of the partner's success, so they withdraw affection to punish them. It's a covert demand for submission.
The result is absolutely a system of control, but the drive is internal regulation, not sadistic pleasure and dominance. Because they cannot self-soothe, they require the environment to do it for them. When the partner succeeds, the covert narcissist feels diminished by comparison.
Right, the envy.
It's a zero-sum game in their mind. The withdrawal, the silent treatment, it's a retreat into their internal fantasy where they are still superior, combined with an infantile demand that the partner drop everything to restore their equilibrium. The tragedy is that the victim loses their own identity in the process of constantly trying to stabilize this bottomless pit of a person.
Which brings us directly to the concept of covert gaslighting. To me, this is the ultimate proof of the predator.
Gaslighting is a heavy term,
But it fits. Covert gaslighting is the systematic distortion of the victim's reality. It's not explosive, terrifying rage. It's the quiet, steady drip of phrases like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "You're imagining things," or my personal favorite, "You're just too sensitive."
It's crazy-making.
It is a targeted attack on the victim's sanity. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because the consistent strategic nature of these verbal habits proves a level of calculated predation.
But is it conscious?
They don't just occasionally misremember events. They actively rewrite history to ensure they are never the villain and the victim is always the unstable one. This level of reality distortion requires intent. They know what actually happened, but they choose to lie to break the victim down.
I disagree that it requires conscious, predatory intent to be that systematic. The destructiveness of this gaslighting actually lies in how it exploits the victim's psychological mechanics. We have to look at Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance and Jennifer Freyd's betrayal blindness.
Walk us through how those apply here.
The victim's nervous system is forced to hold two profoundly contradictory truths. Truth 1, this person is my partner, my source of safety, love, and attachment. Truth 2, this person is the source of my psychological abuse.
Those can't coexist.
Exactly. The human nervous system cannot physically tolerate knowing that the person you sleep next to is destroying you. It is a biological survival threat.
So what does the brain do?
It literally adapts to minimize the harm. To survive the massive cognitive dissonance, your brain deletes the red flags to keep you safe in the attachment bond. The resulting epistemic damage is profound. Think of epistemic damage like someone covertly changing the prescription on your glasses every single day by just a fraction of a millimeter.
Wow. That is a terrifying image.
It is. You don't realize they are doing it. You just wake up one day believing your own eyes are failing you. That's what epistemic damage is. It's not just someone lying to you. It's the dismantling of your cognitive hardware so you can no longer trust your own brain.
I completely agree on the impact.
And it is so damaging precisely because the covert narcissist's sensitivity and suffering appear so genuine. The narcissist unconsciously distorts reality to avoid a shame spiral, and the victim adopts that distorted reality to preserve the attachment bond. It's a shared delusion born of trauma, not a calculated psychological torture program.
Wait, I have a really hard time buying that this is entirely unconscious. If it's merely a subconscious defense mechanism, an uncontrollable reflex to protect a fragile ego, how do we explain their public versus private persona?
What do you mean?
We see this constantly in the clinical profiles. The covert narcissist is the beloved community volunteer, the quiet, sensitive colleague, the person everyone at the dinner party thinks is just so sweet and unassuming.
Yes, the mask.
Yet, the minute they get in the car to drive home, they are subjecting their partner to a barrage of micro-insults, silent treatments, and gaslighting. If their behavior was purely an uncontrollable defense, you would bleed into their public life.
Not necessarily.
If they are so fragmented, why don't they ruin the office presentation? The fact that they can turn the abuse off at a dinner party and turn it right back on in private proves they have cognitive control over their actions. They know exactly what they are doing, they know it's unacceptable, and they know to hide it.
That split between public and private doesn't prove predatory calculation. It actually proves the rigidity of their defense mechanisms and the terrifying nature of intimacy.
How so? Intimacy is terrifying to them?
Absolutely. In public, interactions are superficial. A coworker or a casual friend doesn't require deep emotional reciprocity. The narcissist can easily maintain their false self, the mask of the sensitive good person, because public interactions provide low-stakes, easy narcissistic supply. But true intimacy?
It requires more?
Intimacy requires vulnerability, mutuality, and the recognition of the other person as a separate subject with their own needs.
Which they are incapable of.
Fundamentally incapable. When they are in a private, intimate relationship, the sheer proximity threatens their fragile self-structure. A spouse having a bad day or needing support feels like an existential demand they cannot meet. So the primitive defenses, projection, devaluation, passive aggression, are triggered almost exclusively in the intimate sphere.
So it's proximity-based.
They aren't turning it off and on like a sociopath. They are reacting to completely different levels of psychological threat. The closer you get to a covert narcissist, the more dangerous they become to your reality, because intimacy itself is the trigger.
But even if we accept that intimacy is the trigger, we cannot ignore the aftermath when the victim finally figures it out and tries to leave. The devaluation and discard phases are incredibly systematic. When the target starts setting healthy boundaries or attempts to exit the relationship, the covert narcissist doesn't just retreat into their shell, they launch a counteroffensive.
The smear campaigns again.
Yes, They use strategic disclosure, sharing text messages taken completely out of context, or fabricating incidents to manipulate mutual friends. They play the role of the heartbroken, abandoned, blindsided partner to generate sympathy and isolate the victim.
It is brutal.
It's impression management on steroids. They are managing the optics of the breakup to ensure their social supply remains intact, while the victim is left looking like the abuser.
The devaluation and discard are brutal. I am not minimizing that. But again, look at the psychological mechanism. When the victim pulls away, the narcissist experiences a total catastrophic collapse of their supply. Their ego is facing annihilation.
So they attack.
The smear campaign, the playing of the heartbroken victim, these are frantic, flailing attempts to restore homeostasis. They aren't sitting in a dark room, rubbing their hands together, plotting how to ruin the victim's reputation.
They certainly act like it.
But they don't think like it. They are genuinely convinced that they have been catastrophically wronged because their defense mechanisms simply will not allow them to process their own culpability. If they admit they caused a breakup, their psyche shatters. It's an issue of profound pathology. The only way they can survive the end of the relationship is by completely rewriting the narrative so they remain the flawless, deeply wounded martyr.
Let's bring this to our conclusion. We're looking at two distinct frameworks for understanding the exact same devastating behavior. I view covert narcissism as a structurally aggressive, predatory pattern of manipulation. It is an adaptation of the narcissistic entitlement structure, cleverly hidden behind a socially acceptable mask of humility and victimhood. This camouflage allows them to systematically extract power, emotional labor, and control from their targets while utilizing tactics like weaponized incompetence and covert gaslighting to maintain total plausible deniability. They are the hidden predator.
And I view it as a tragic, devastating manifestation of a fragmented, fragile self. The covert narcissist is trapped in an unconscious, desperate cycle of using the people closest to them to regulate an unbearable internal emptiness and shame.
Right.
The behavior stems from severe structural deficits that make them incapable of reciprocal intimacy, resulting in the profound destruction of their partner's epistemic reality, literally dismantling their ability to trust their own mind.
Yet, regardless of whether the engine is calculated predation or unconscious defense, we completely converge on the impact. The psychological toll on the victim is uniquely insidious. We're talking about a nervous system stuck in a constant freeze response.
Absolutely.
Chronic guilt, severe anxiety, elevated cortisol levels that physically break down the body, and the development of complex PTSD. Traditional recovery methods for overt abuse often fail here because the harm leaves no visible bruises. It's an invisible, systematic erosion of the victim's self.
Exactly. And that is why it is so crucial for victims to recognize these subtle patterns. You have to protect your own sanity because a narcissist cannot and will not validate your reality. The clinical literature points to specific, evidence-based protective strategies once you recognize the pattern.
Like the gray rock method?
Precisely. The gray rock method is where you become as emotionally uninteresting and unresponsive as a gray rock by giving short, neutral responses and refusing to take the bait of their passive aggression or their sob stories. You effectively starve the narcissist of the emotional supply they are trying to extract.
Make yourself boring.
Exactly. Their nervous system realizes it can't feed off of yours anymore.
Or the slow fade for safely terminating platonic or professional relationships, gradually withdrawing access, information, and availability over time. You don't provide the dramatic, boundary-setting confrontation because, as we discussed, that just triggers their reactive smear campaigns. You just quietly disappear from their radar.
The complexity of personality disorders, especially one as camouflaged and deeply layered as covert narcissism, requires us to look beyond the surface of a seemingly shy, depressed person.
We highly suggest our listeners explore the clinical literature to deepen their understanding of these hidden dynamics, because, as we established at the start, the most dangerous predator isn't the lion roaring on the savannah. It's the one sitting on your couch, weeping, convincing you that their teeth marks on your arm are actually your fault.
A chilling reality, and one that requires our absolute vigilance.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the invisible. Keep questioning what you see and, more importantly, trust what you feel.